back before Pilate, and Pilate sentenced him to death. The people reject Barabbas and call for Christ to be crucified. He's then scourged and beaten. And to tell you, or to let us know how bad the scourging and beating was, Christ is unable to carry his own cross down the road of suffering. One Simon from Cyrene must help him because Jesus is in such bad shape. So we've gone really from Thursday night into the early moments of Friday morning. And our time cue is found in Mark 15. It says, and it was the third hour when they crucified him. Now, the third hour doesn't mean a lot to you and I, but that's about 9 a.m. in the morning. So Christ is crucified at around 9 a.m. in the morning. He's ripped, or most of his clothing is ripped from him, but it's not torn because they want to keep it, and it's gambled for. And somewhere around 9 a.m. in the morning, we hear these words from Jesus. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And then they cast lots to divide his garments. In this moment, in this second, what we see is the beauty of Jesus Christ. These captors, these individuals have just nailed him brutally to a cross. Previously to that, they had beaten him to a pulp. And now what does he say? Father, forgive them. These words will be echoed down the centuries by Christian martyr after Christian martyr after Christian martyr. For Jesus set the example. Stephen echoes these words, and the one known as Saul, who we know as Paul, comes to faith because of Stephen. But we see in these words, as this battle rages, the beauty of Jesus Christ. By 10 a.m., things get nasty. It is a horrible thing to see an individual die. It is a gruesome thing to see an individual crucified. It is inhumane when someone is being crucified to mock them. Yet Jesus is insulted and mocked by a mob. And then the Jewish leaders who were taking particular satisfaction in this mock him. And then the soldiers mock him. And then even the dying thieves trade insults. Both of them. But something happens to the one thief as he watches Jesus. And he in essence says to the other thief, what are you saying? Don't you see we are in the same state? And we deservedly so, but this man has done nothing. And then he makes this request. Remember me when you come into your kingdom. And then we hear those next words of Jesus. Truly, I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise. The battle over the soul of that man had been fierce. And now he belongs to God. Tonight, as maybe you came in here, maybe you didn't realize there's a battle for our souls going on. Here we see the deity of Jesus Christ. For who can give you entrance into heaven? Who can give you entrance into paradise but God? If I said to you, hey, you're in heaven, let me tell you how much good that is. No good. No good. No good. There's only one. There is only one. Sometime during this time, probably before noon, Jesus speaks to Mary and to John. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Behold your mother." And from that day the disciple took her to his own home. But see here as well the duty of Jesus. That Jesus, not only in this is his beauty seen and his deity, but he's taken care of earthly matters. He's taken care of his mother. Even at the depths of his despair, the greatness of his pain. You know, I think that the book has not yet been written, but needs to be written. Jesus Christ showed us how to live, but he also showed us how to die. If you want to know how to die, follow the example of Jesus. Forgiving others, bringing others to heaven, and taking care of your earthly matters. It is now noon. Our next verbal clue is Mark 15:33. It says, "The 6th hour have come, and there was darkness over the whole earth." I've been so entrenched in my thoughts, I have not flicked anything, have I? It's the 6th hour. Darkness over the whole earth until the 9th hour. So now it is noon. And it will be dark from noon till 3. During the first 3 hours of Calvary, we see Jesus enduring the wrath of man. From noon to 3, Jesus endures the wrath of God. How could God be mad at his son? God was not mad at his son. God was angry with the sin that was upon his son. And some of that sin was mine. Some of that sin was yours. Jesus and the whole earth are in darkness for 3 hours, and it is here that he is suffering. He is suffering the wrath of God for my sin. At the 9th hour, that would be 3 o'clock, Jesus cries with a loud voice. He cries out to the Father, and he says, in our language, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Here we see the singularity of Jesus. Jesus is all alone. Because Jesus cried these words, I will never cry these words. Because Jesus cried these words, there will never be a moment, there will never be a second, there will never be a minutiae portion of a second that I am left alone by God. Never. Even when I die, the Bible doesn't speak of it for me as death. It says I fall asleep. But it says he died. He suffered separation from God. The worst you can ever say that will happen to me is he fell asleep. Now, wouldn't that be horrible? And he cries, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" We know this from Psalm 22. But sometimes we forget to read Psalm 22 in verse 3. Because he cries that, or you see that in Psalm 22, verses 1 and 2. And then verse 3 says, "For thou art holy." It answers the question, why did God forsake his son? Because he was holy. And Jesus was made sin. Jesus was made sin. Made sin. I've had some weird jobs in my life. I've been involved in some crazy things, and I'll never forget the time I had to help a plumber. We went down into the bottom of an old restaurant, and we had to clean a trap, one of those old grease traps. And I remember carving into the grease trap with the mud and the sludge and all of the mess and getting it all over me. And how it felt just so absolutely defiling. And how I never wanted to go anywhere near a grease trap again. I didn't deserve a grease trap. It wasn't what I signed up for. And I smelled, and even after you took a bath, it was still under your fingernails, and you still smelled. The next day, they brought in a real plumber, and he smoked a cigar the whole time he cleaned the grease trap, because he said, it's the only way you can clean a grease trap. I never experienced that level of indignity and ugliness. Think of Jesus. His soul is pure, undefiled. Jesus not only never spoke a curse word never came across his mind. Jesus not only never looked at a woman with lust, a lustful thought never came across his mind. Jesus was never jealous. Jesus was never angry in unrighteousness. Jesus was never any of those things. Yet he became them all for you and for me. And God pulls away from him. And then Jesus cries out for hydration. He says, I thirst. Now this just speaks very, very simply of the humanity of Christ. Psalm 22 speaks of the great thirst involved in a crucifixion. But this speaks of his humanity. And then shortly thereafter, somewhere, Jesus cried out in victory. In the Greek language, it's one word. In our language, it is finished. In Greek, I believe it's teleaste. Christ cried out, it's done. I do not think that Jesus cried out, it's finished. I think he cried out in victory, it is finished. Done. 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 Something that had been planned in the foreknowledge of God, in the counsel of the Trinity, in eternity past, is now fully accomplished. Now, when Christ died for my sin, remember this. Remember this. He took my sin away. For years and years and years, atonement had been made for sin. That is to say, the final payment of the sins was pushed further and further and further away. Now, many of you understand that because you have interest-only loans. And the principal just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So from the time of Adam and Eve till Calvary, all of those sins. And from the time of Calvary to whenever we reach glory, all of those sins. And Jesus cries out what? It is finished. The victory of Jesus. And then we're reminded, finally, of Jesus crying out and giving up his spirit, and it expires. He said, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. And having said this, he did what? He breathed his last. His dignity. No one took Jesus' life. Jesus gave it up. And he gave it up for us. the hours after Calvary from 3 p.m. After 3 p.m. but before sundown, we read that the veil of the temple is torn in two from top to bottom with an earthquake. That veil separated the holiest place from the Holy of Holies, and it is ripped wide open because now there is a new and living way, and we have access to the Father. The centurion says, truly, this was the Son of God. And Jesus' legs are not broken in fulfillment of prophecy. You see, in reality, Jesus died on the cross quite quickly because he was suffering for you and I. His side is pierced, and water and blood come out, separated, letting us know he's really dead. Those who would tell you that Jesus swooned on the cross do not understand Roman executions. This was not something done by the Keystone Cops. This was done by murderers who knew what they were doing. His body is prepared in the Jewish custom of 100 pounds of spices, and he's laid in a tomb before the Sabbath begins. The women witness where he is, and in advance of the Sabbath, prepare spices. And then everything is quiet. We share these words tonight so that we all might simply reflect on Calvary, on these powerful, life-changing moments of Calvary. I'm going to ask our leaders to make their way to the front as we now share in the Lord's table. We practice open communion here at Calvary. We only ask that you be a believer and a follower of Jesus Christ to share with us tonight.